Hello, and welcome to my channel. The title of this video is A Basic Study of Lord Varuna in the Vedas. Introduction. Who is Lord Varuna? Lord Varuna is known in modern Hinduism primarily as the god of the oceans or the overlord of the water element. He is also the guardian of the West. Like many Devas of the Vedic era, he is no longer as actively engaged with the human community as he has been in the past. One of his more well-known appearances is in the Hindu epic the Ramayana. Lord Rama performed a 3-day penance to invoke Lord Varuna for his aid. When the Deva did not respond, Lord Rama used his celestial weapons to attack the Indian Ocean. When he did manifest, the Deva begged Lord Rama to aim his weapons at the Nivata Kavacha tribe of Asuras, who had a base under the water on the ocean floor. They had previously fought with Ravanasura, and he was unable to defeat their warriors, as they were the strongest Asura tribe. Besides his role as a supporting actor in the legends of the Puranas, he is ritually invoked in the modern fire ritual, the Homa, after Lord Ganesha to purify the ritual space. This is because of his association with water. In the Vedic era, Lord Varuna had a much more expansive role. He was already associated with the water element, but beyond that, he was worshipped by many sages as the Supreme Lord. He was the King of Kings, who was central in the creation of the universe and set the constellations in their places. Here at the beginning of this study, I would like to make clear, as always, that I am not speaking from a position of authority. I am merely sharing my own research as it stands, and it should also be borne in mind that this study is a basic one and is not absolutely exhaustive. As a matter of fact, because of time constraints, there were several important points that I had to leave out. There's still much more that can be said. I will post as many of the sources as I am able in the notes below, and I invite comments from those who may have more to add on the subject of Lord Varuna, or who may be critical of my views. The nature of the Devas. Before proceeding with this study of Lord Varuna in particular, it is worthwhile to reflect for a few moments on the nature of the Devas. This will place much of the information about him in context, as well as clarify his larger role in the cosmic order. For those who may be more removed from these subjects, you might ask who or what are the Devas? The simple answer is the Devas are the gods, in a rough equivalence. One might think of them also as the intelligences manifesting as the forces of the material world. Some have compared them to the angels in the Judeo-Christian religions. However, the Devas have more autonomy than the angels, and they have wrathful aspects. Also, their main function is not, like the biblical angels, to continually praise God. Lord Shiva does not need praise. Finally, in an ultimate sense, the Devas are all manifestations of Parabramha, as are in fact all beings and objects. While as individualized from each other as humans are and possessed of personality, they have an innate broader awareness of the divine than man and a far wider latitude of action due to the nature of their being. The appearance of the Devas. The primary visual attributes of the Devas and of all celestial people is that they are self-luminous. The Adityas for example, are described as self-radiant. This same description is given of Rudras, another class of etheric entities, such as the Maruts, who are luminous and sometimes appear with the purple hue. One form of Lord Indra is golden, and Lord Varuna is praised in one hymn as being the luminous golden color of the sunrise. This illumination can also be perceived as many different colors, not simply the tones of gold and purple, which are most frequently described in the Rig Veda. This same quality applies to the chariots or vehicles of the Devas, which humans perceive. A common adjective is blazing. In the Atharva Veda, the horses of Lord Indra are luminous green with the appearance of flashing peacock patterns and colors to their tails and manes. This phosphorescent quality is the product of the etheric material from which the rather plastic bodies of these species are composed. The seers tell us that Agni is all Devas. The Devas, then, are composed of plasma. This does not refer to the celestial Lord Agni, the Agni of this verse, but rather to prana, or what is called chi in Chinese medicine. Quote, "You, Agni, are Indra, the showerer of bounties on the good. You are the adorable Vishnu, the hymned of many. You are Brahmaspati, our Brahman, the possessor of riches. You, Agni, are the royal Varuna, observant of holy vows. You are the adorable Mitra, the destroyer of foes. You are Aryaman, protector of the virtuous. You are the divine Savita, the possessor of precious things." Unquote. It is this form of Agni, the yogic Agni, from which all beings are generated, and that ultimately makes all manifest, as the energetic substratum of the manifestation of consciousness. The material world appears and fluctuations as one aspect of this field, while the etheric species thrive in another. A rough analogy might be the distinction between the land, ocean, and the atmosphere. While parts of the same planet and interdependent, they are radically different environments, with specialized creatures that cannot function in another ecosystem without artificial aids. Bacteria which exist in the upper atmosphere, for example, could not trade places with those that thrive in the depths of the Marianas Trench, amid the eruptions of volcanoes, even though they all belong to the same planet and are even bacteria. Because the Devas are energetic beings, they do not possess a single form. In what we might call their natural state, they are only energy and consciousness, although that speculation is not in the hymns of the Vedas. As in later Hindu art, they assume various functions which are often reflective of their function. They assume various forms which are often reflective of their function. The sages say that Lord Indra has 3 forms, and in the case of Lord Agni, he is said to have both black and white forms. The Ashvins have a human form, and another is therianthropic, in which they appear with horses' heads. In the Vedas, there were no physical images or objects used in rituals to represent the Devas. The reason for this is that they were visible to the Brahmins in the course of the rites, appearing on the darba grass spread around the altars and also on the hide called Indrastation, laying onto the ground next to the main altar, upon which drops of the soma were sprinkled. Types of Devas. The Devas are described as having different types. These seem to be determined based upon their location and function within the world. There are celestial and terrestrial devas. From the human perspective, this relationship appears to be hierarchical. These different types may be seen in the following verses. Quote, Devas who are 11 in heaven, who are 11 on earth, who are 11 dwelling with glory in mid-air, may you be pleased with this our sacrifice. Unquote. The apex of the managerial structure is the Supreme Lord and then the Adityas. These are the offspring or emanations, to use a more philosophical term, of the primeval goddess Aditi, of whom all existence is composed. In addition to the celestial devas, such as the Adityas, there are also classes of terrestrial devas who function closer to the world of appearance. In all probability, these are much closer to the kami of the Shinto religion of Japan. Like the kami, they are associated with fixed locations in the natural world. Quote, we invoke for our protection the thrice 7 flowing rivers, their great waters, the trees, the mountains. Unquote. Sacrifice. Quote, by praises and sacrifices, Indra, men bring down what they desire from you. As the waters descend from the top of the mountain, desirous of food, they approach you who are accessible by praise. With these their eulogies, as eagerly as corsairs rush to battle. Unquote. The seers of the Vedas were quite keen to seek the friendship of the Devas. As mentioned, this is generally of the powerful celestial Devas who were sought as patrons. The nature of this relationship is important. It is not one of subservience or submission, such as in the case of the Abrahamic faiths, but of mutual benefit. Thus, the Western view of sacrifice as a grim affair in which one surrenders some possession or aspect without benefit as an act of worship, as conditioned by Christianity, must be abandoned. The primary example of that might be, although we could pick many, Saint Mary Margaret, who was vouchsafed her vision of the Sacred Heart because, to honor Christ, she drank a sick patient's diarrhea. This is not a Vedic view. In the material realm, we consume matter and convert it into energy to survive. It is the same for the etheric species. They too must consume energy to thrive. This is why the sages tell us that the devas are nourished by sacrifice. The sages say the universe is nourished by offerings to the sacred fire as well. Agni, as the sacred fire into which the sacrifices are offered, is called the tongue of the devas. This is because it is the fire which transforms the physical objects offered in much the same way as material beings digest food, as a rough analogy. The sages describe this energy to us as light concentrated in the sun. While this is primarily accomplished through the vehicle of fire, it is not the only means. There are examples in the Rig Veda where the seers sing, divine language sustains Vayu, referring to the recitation of the Vedic hymns, mantras, and prayers offered as a form of sacrifice. The Devas desire adoration. It is the doctrine of the Vedic seers that Lord Indra and Lord Vishnu made the world for sacrifice. One of our tasks is to learn to grow through mutual benefit, not only between men, but between man and the Devas as well. Quote, he who propitiates the Devas, gives to the Devas, and sits at ease upon the summit of heaven. To him the flowing waters bear their existence. To him the female earth yields abundance. Unquote. Activities of the Devas. The activities of the Devas are an expression of Rita, the cosmic order, which is, of course, Lord Vishnu, in the natural world as the intelligence behind manifestation, natural law, and also as the outgrowth of the sacrificial relationship with man in the human sphere. The benefit of this cycle of giving to man are both celestial and terrestrial. The human desire is to dispel poverty and fulfill our material needs, but also to obtain all enjoyments that are good for man. The other hand of this sacrifice removes sin and opens for man the path to heaven. This brief outline of the nature of Devas will set the context for our study of Lord Varuna and his role within the system, as we have described in both celestial and terrestrial aspects. Methods of textual analysis. Triplification. The method I will be using to analyze this in the Vedas is called triplification. When one takes a term in the Vedas, such as Agni, for example, and studies the mantras consistently, one finds that the term is used generally in 3 different ways, which are determined by context. Thus, there is the celestial Agni, who is the Deva Lord Agni, and the terrestrial Agni, which is fire, often most particularly the fire of sacrifice. Then there is Agni in the microcosm. This is the Yogic Agni, which is Agni within man, or boiling it down most basically to prana. All right, and with that, let's begin to study Lord Varuna. The celestial Lord Varuna. The appearance of Lord Varuna. The celestial Lord Varuna is an Aditya. As such, he is at the apex of the celestial hierarchy. As has been noted, he was worshipped by a number of the Vedic seers as the Supreme Lord and is the 3rd most common in the Vedas to bear this title. Compared to the Ashvin Kumars, or Lord Indra, relatively little detail is given to describe how the sages perceived him. What is recorded is, like all the Devas, he is self-luminous, and in the Yajurveda is described, quote, "With golden bodies, at the flush of dawn you rise on high, 2 sovereign lords and Surya, the sun. Ascend your car, O Varuna and Mitra, thence view infinity and limitation," unquote. The viewer should note this rather cryptic reference to view infinity and limitation, as it will prove to be critical later. This association with gold is also found in the Rig Veda. He is described as being clad in golden swirled armor and to have forms which are brilliant and radiant as the sun. The description of his chariot, which he shares with Lord Mitra, is also rather sparse. It is said to be golden with iron pillars and, quote, "Exceeding is your greatness, Mitra and Varuna, whereby the ever-moving sun has by succeeding days milked forth the stationary waters. You augment all the 2 illuminating rays of the self-revolving sun. The one chariot of you 2 perpetually goes round," unquote. In relation to this golden chariot, the sages inform us that it is drawn by a green-brown horse. Compared again to some of the details, Given regarding Lord Indra's chariot horses, this is very skimpy. In one mantra, he is described as opulent, which would imply the seers visualized him as rather richly dressed in an aristocratic manner. Given his status as an Aditya and the supreme lord to some seers at least, this would be fitting. But it should be noted that there is much more physical description for the Maruts and the Ashvins, for example. The only other detail we are given in the Rig Veda is that he dwells in a mansion of 1,000 columns, which would be located in his symbolic dwelling in the baseless firmament. In the Atharva Veda, where Lord Varuna is assigned to the status as overlord of the western quarter, he is said to have an adder. In the later Puranic literature, his mount is a crocodile and not an adder. The presence of the adder may be indicative of the two later associations in the Puranas with Lord Varuna. One is his role as lord of the Nagas, who are snake therianthropes, which Denny Sargent did not mention in his otherwise very good book. The second is his noose, not described in the Vedas, but later conceived in the form of a snake. This weapon is able to bind any being, including the Devas. Neither of these, again, are mentioned in the Vedas, nor are the Nagas, by the way. As an aside, I will assume that the adder here, as it's translated, means the Russell's viper. Now, why this is his viper, I don't know, when it should belong to Lord Varuna, I would guess, and not this Russell cat. It is a very deadly snake. In fact, it's considered to be the second most poisonous in the world after the African black mamba. One epitaph which can cause some confusion is that Lord Varuna is called an asura in the Vedas. This does not mean that he is one of the etheric species with whom some of the Devas, particularly Lord Vishnu and Lord Indra, are often in conflict, or at least they were. We don't know what's going on today. The reason for this is twofold. Lord Varuna is an Aditya, and as such he cannot be one of the children of Danu. And second, he is praised in some verses as asura-destroying. The asuras, therefore, are called that because of their powerful nature. So the same meaning would apply to Lord Varuna, loosely used. One might also wonder, why is Lord Varuna so vague compared to many other devas in the Rig Veda and the other Vedas? There may be two answers to this question. One is that the sages say his form is water, thus he would be rather fluid and undefined. Another is that Lord Varuna appears to be more removed from the human sphere of activity. It is true that he did manifest at the Vedic sacrifices with other devas sitting upon the Dharma grass. Pardon me. But generally he's said to survey the world through the eye of the sun and through his spies, which unfortunately they don't tell us who they were, so we could be on the lookout for them. But these spies behold heaven and earth. This seems to imply distance, as he is more removed, and given the remote location and dwelling ascribed to him, this is not surprising. Although, to be thorough, I suppose I should mention what is very probably the academic view on these things. They would say that Lord Varuna is more fuzzy because in the stages of religious evolution, he is receding to the background as the former head of the Aryan pantheon, superseded by Lord Indra. That's their view. That's not one that I believe myself. The office of Lord Varuna: guardian of truth, justice, and forgiveness. The primary office of Lord Varuna in the Vedas is the guardian of the moral order and truth. As a judge, he is specifically the detector of untruth. He is continually aware of human activity and particularly observant of evil. The primary lens of his perception, as described by the sages, is the sun, which is also described as his eye, and of course the aforementioned spies. Lord Varuna is one of the most often sought after of the Devas to forgive sin. The Deva destroys sin and discharges debt, which is to liberate one from the bonds or fetters which he may impose upon the sinner. In one hymn, Lord Agni intercedes with Lord Varuna. Thus, the Deva might be called an administrator of karma. These bonds of Varuna are highly dreaded. In the Atharva Veda, the seers provide special hymns to palliate his wrath. The fetters of Varuna are said to be not made of rope and are arrayed in 3 levels. There is an upper, middle, and lower bond. Unfortunately, no detail is given in the hymns regarding the nature of these fetters directly. They seem to be familiar to the roles played in Puranic literature by Lord Shani, or Saturn, who gives us our karma in this world, and Lord Yama, who gives us our karma after death. But Lord Varuna is also compassionate, so it is to be hoped he is more easily appeased than some others might be in many cases, without mentioning any names to upset anyone. The seers say Mitra grants even to sinful worshippers a spacious dwelling. While generally to be avoided, we see in the Atharva Veda mantras which grant the power to manipulate this power of Lord Varuna to bind for an individual to achieve his own aims. In one example, this is found in a love spell to command a woman's love. Quote, Mitra and Varuna make her powerless, cast out the intents of her heart. Unquote. The Lord of the Water Element. In the Rig Veda, Lord Varuna is praised as the guardian of waters in the oldest section of the Vedas, and he is also associated with undulating waters. In one hymn, he is said to have a liquid form. He is said to have created all waters, spread the waters, and placed the waters in the ocean. In the Atharva Veda as well, Lord Varuna is hailed as the overlord of the waters. This role is not only over the oceans, rivers, and rain, but over the entirety of the liquid element. This is seen in that the sages say it is Lord Varuna who fills cows with milk. This even extends to conception. Rain. The land of the 7 rivers, Sapta Sindhu, where the Vedas were composed, is a semi-arid region. Rain is vital for survival. For this reason, the seers of the Vedas frequently petition all of the Devas for the boon of rain. Lord Varuna, who is the lord of the water element, is naturally high on this list. Quote, imperial and mighty showerer, lords of heaven and earth, beholder of the universe, you approach Mitra and Varuna, and cause the sky to send down rain by the power of the emitter of showers. Unquote. Poison. In his role as guardian of the West in the Atharva Veda, as mentioned, Lord Varuna is portrayed as having an adder as his mount. This is relevant to one of the functions of Lord Varuna, to heal from poisons, particularly snake poisons. The sages of the Atharva Veda say that Lord Varuna is the poet of heaven who gives mantras. For Westerners in this context will say roughly that means spells, to dissolve poison. This is extended to fever and impotence as well. This role of healer is also present in the Rig Veda. In the older strata of the Rig Veda, the family books, the sages teach that Mitra and Varuna protect their devotees from poison and venom. He is even said to alleviate pain. As the lord of the deadly snake, he is the one who is in control of its poison and is able to heal its effects. This is similar to, in Western mythology, Apollo. Apollo is the healer. He also is lord of the python, which he captured from an earlier cult. And his arrows, as we see in the famous beginning of the Iliad, can spread plague. Vedic sacrifices to Lord Varuna. Because of his importance in the Vedic era, Lord Varuna is evoked in a number of the rituals and hymns of the Vedas. This is generally in three specific areas. Two relative to the governance of the water element, rain and purification, and he is also called upon as the sovereign of the moral order. In association with rain, Lord Varuna is invoked with Lord Mitra in the full moon ritual for rain. In this rite, they are offered sticks which are laid on the north side of the altar. The Deva is also invoked not only for rain, but if there is excessive rain and flooding, to save us from the waters. The Brahmins also called upon Lord Varuna to generate the morning dew, which was very important for the semi-arid region of the land of the seven rivers. One of the earliest examples of Lord Varuna called upon for purification and also healing is found in the Rajasuya ceremony, which is the coronation rite for the king. In the ancient world, the concept of healing and purification were more closely related as they are in this area. It is perhaps for this reason that Lord Varuna is offered a rice cake in the Sautamini rite, which was originally an atonement for excessive drinking of the Soma brew. Pardon me. One of the rituals where he is most present is in the horse sacrifice. He receives 5 separate blood sacrifices in this rite. To the form of Mitra Varuna, a pigeon, red geese, and buffalo are offered. Lord Varuna alone receives brown goats and a ram. In the Soma sacrifice, Lord Varuna is honored with Lord Mitra by the 5th cup of the Soma in their aspect as law strengtheners. However, his primary role in this ritual is tied to the transportation of the Soma to the hall of sacrifice. Once the prepared Soma is placed on the cart, it is covered with a black antelope skin, which is called the skin of Aditya, and is told, truly these are Varuna's ordinances. Then the Soma is addressed, quote, You are the prop of Varuna to rest on, are the pins that strengthen Varuna's pillar. You are the lawful seat of Varuna. This relationship between Soma and Varuna runs even deeper. The Brahmins chant, Soma when come, when seated on the platform, Varuna. Thus, there is a ritual identification between Soma and aspects of Lord Varuna. The terrestrial Lord Varuna, the cosmic threshold of manifestation. Quote, King Varuna, who made a spacious pathway, a pathway for the sun wherein to travel. Unquote. The meaning of the root for the word Varuna is to encompass or surround. The celestial Lord Varuna may encompass us with his karmic bonds, but the terrestrial Varuna surrounds us with the boundaries of the material realm itself. He is the liminal zone between the infinity of the cosmic ocean, which is the night sky, and the world. This metaphoric beach on the hidden ocean, which is the beginning of our land, is the band of the lunar asterisms, or nakshatras, across the sky and the horizon, and is supported by the cosmic pillar, which is the Milky Way. When the Vedas refer to constellations, it is to these that they refer, that is, the lunar asterisms, not the Western zodiac. It is through them that the energy of manifestation flows down, poetically described as rays, into the material universe. It is through this flow that karma is unfolded. Thus, there is a subtle link between the celestial and the terrestrial aspects or uses, however one may choose to perceive this, of Varuna. To study this matter, we will begin by excavating the mantras in the Vedas which describe these aspects of the terrestrial Varuna. That is why Varuna is said to behold infinity and limitation. He is the line between them. The deepest waters. The waters over which Lord Varuna rules are not only those of the liquid element on the earth. They are also the hidden ocean, with which the sages identify the Deva. These are the deepest waters, and such are also the darkest, the night sky. In one mantra, Varuna is said to have 1,000 eyes, which may refer to the stars. The deepest water is also the primal water from which creation arose. It is within them that the zone for materiality was made manifest. The pathway, the shore of the hidden ocean. Quote, He who visible above the sky sustains the points of the horizon is the measurer of the universe. This is the ancient abode of Varuna, to which we have access. He is our Lord. Unquote. From the human perspective, the sky above us is an arc. The sun follows the curve of this arc as it generates the daylight. And in the evening, when trodden by the moon, the constellations otherwise hidden by the brightness of the sun, are visible. The Vedic sages associated this pathway with Varuna. This is the same road on which the day and night are seen in two verses in one hymn. Quote, "The regal Varuna verily made wide the path of the sun, by which to travel in his daily course, a path to traverse in pathless space." Unquote. Later, quote, "These constellations placed on high, which are visible by night and go elsewhere in the day, are the undisputed holy acts of Varuna, and by his command the moon moves resplendent by night." Unquote. Another component of this architecture is the horizon, which sets the borders of the visible world from the natural perspective. In the hymns, Lord Varuna is identified with the 2 points on this circumference which are most important: sunrise and sunset. Quote, "With golden bodies, at the flush of dawn you rise on high, 2 sovereign lords and Surya, ascend your car, Mitra and Varuna." Unquote. In this verse from the Yajurveda, Lord Varuna is associated only with the dawn, but in the Rig Veda, it is poetically implied he is both sunrise and sunset. Quote, "He divided the great nights from the day." Unquote. The points of division are the sunrise and the sunset. These mark the boundaries of the Earth sphere. Thus, there are the points on the horizon measured by Varuna, of which the sages speak in the hymns. This is why he is called circumambient Varuna. Within the terrestrial Varuna are laid out the horizontal circumference of the sphere which defines the Earth, as well as the vertical arc of the constellations or lunar asterisms, which are the pathway defining the upper boundary of the sphere, which corresponds from the point of view of the observer to the world. The pillar, the Milky Way. Quote, "Royal Mitra and Varuna, you uphold by your energies earth and heaven." Unquote. And in another hymn, quote, "Permanent in greatness are the births of that Varuna who propped up the vast heaven and earth." Unquote. The prop, which supports the world and the arc of the lunar asterisms, the constellations, across the heaven is a pillar. When observing the night sky, the strongest candidate for this role is the Milky Way. It is not otherwise identified, the Milky Way that is, within the Vedas. As an aside, at this point in history, the Milky Way runs through the zodiac constellation of Sagittarius in Dhanishta Nakshatra. Since this is speculation, I'll avoid all argument about date, but if we theoretically say the Rig Veda had its origin at the beginning of the astrological age of Aries in roughly 2150 BC, then the Milky Way would have been running through Aquarius, and particularly the nakshatra of Shatabisha, which, by the way, in my Navamsha chart is where Saturn and Rahu are conjoined. While not saying there is continuity, it is curious to note that the Deva who rules this lunar asterism in modern Vedic astrology is Lord Varuna. Perhaps this is his abode at the base of the firmament, if looked upon more literally. This is a subject which requires more study. And I must correct myself. There are no nakshatras in the Navamsha. My Saturn and Rahu are just in Aquarius, so I stand corrected. The 7 streaming rays. Quote, Varuna set free the waters of the rivers generated in the firmament. Unquote. Another component of this structure of the terrestrial Varuna is expressed in some verses as rays and in others as rivers. It is common among integralist culture to see the physical geography as either a reflection or a continuity of the celestial geography. Some researchers, such as Robert Bouval, have argued that the Giza complex in Egypt is astronomically aligned to reflect the belt of the constellation of Orion, with the Nile as the Milky Way. In another part of the world, the Inca built structures through the sacred valley of Inca, which were designed to reflect the constellations that appeared in their night sky, as William Sullivan notes in The Secret of the Inca. It should not be surprising, then, that the seers speak of not only the physical 7 rivers which nourish their homeland, but saw these same forces reflected in the night sky. Pardon me. Quote, I praise with a like praise the praises of my progenitors, that Varuna who shines up on the vicinity of the rivers, and in the midst of them has 7 sisters. Unquote. It is highly doubtful these are the physical streams of the land of the 7 rivers, since there is no point which they are all visible with the naked eye, given their distance. This refers to the rivers of the firmament, previously mentioned as having been generated by Varuna. Because of symmetry with the material rivers, we can assume these are 7, and they're also the 7 cryptic sisters. While Lady Usas, the Dawn, is said to be the sister of Varuna, the identity of these sisters is not explicitly given in the Vedas. In the context of Tantra, not to project this backwards onto the text, one might speculate that these are the 7 Shaktis, goddesses or energies of Varuna. To summarize this, there is Varuna with 7 rivers, 7 sisters, and 7 rays. The simplest explanation of this construct is that the 3 sets of 7 all refer to different aspects of the same thing, which may possibly be in upper, middle, and lower, but that's already going elsewhere. In all probability, these are the 7 visible planets. The planets are surprisingly rarely mentioned in the Vedas. Explicitly, I believe, only once in relation to Lord Indra. Given that these are the only obvious set of 7 in the visible sky, their identification as such does seem rational. This is reinforced by the fact that they travel across the path of the constellations, an aspect of the terrestrial Varuna. The identification of this structure with Varuna. At this point, one might object that while this architecture may be attributed to Lord Varuna by the sages, it is baseless to assert that it is identified with him or is an expression of him. This is not Varuna, they might say. However, that does not seem to be the teaching of the seers. Quote, Varuna thus spoke to me, possessed of understanding. He declared to me the mysteries of the place. In him are deposited The three heavens, the three earths with their 6 seasons are shown in him. The most adorable, royal Varuna has made this golden sun undulating in the sky. He has made it to diffuse light." Unquote. In his translation here, Mr. Wilson adds after the phrase "mysteries of the praise" the words of Brahma in parentheses. He is assuming it is not Varuna who is the subject, but Brahma. This is problematic for 2 reasons. 1, Varuna is the subject of the hymn. 2, Brahma in the later sense of creator is called Lord Vishwakarma in the Rig Veda. So this is referring to Varuna. Elsewhere in the hymn, Mitra and Varuna are said to uphold the 3 realms as well. Without going too deeply into this, it is clear the structure which defines the form of the heavens, the material realm, and the unfolding of the seasons, the points of the movement of the sun on the horizon, and the movement with the moon of it through the constellations, is identified with Varuna. That being established, it explains a rather cryptic verse in the Rig Veda. Quote, "Through him, Varuna, the sages behold marvels, past and future." Unquote. Given that an aspect of Varuna is the constellations and the planets, the manner in which the sages would know the past and future through him, in this manner, would be the science of astrology. As this is through Varuna, it is clear that he is identical with this structure, that is, the terrestrial Varuna, as we are conceiving it here. Counterpoint: Varuna Devata as the primeval waters. A different opinion about Lord Varuna may be found in the book A Study of Deities of Rig Veda by Dr. S.S. Gupta. This work was originally published towards the end of the last century. While I do not agree with his views, I do recommend it to the viewers to see the Rig Veda in a different perspective. Dr. Gupta, like many thinkers in the subcontinent, follows Aurobindo in his reading of the Vedas, which I call symbolist reductionist. This means their thesis is that the text of the Vedas are a symbolic code which cannot be understood without an encryption key. In many cases, the writers will see this key as some modern science which they claim the seers of the Vedas fully understood and encoded in the text. That, they will say, is the real meaning. In Dr. Gupta's case, this is solar science as it relates specifically to meteorology. In his view, the goddess Aditya in the Rig Veda was actually understood by the sages to be the photosphere of the sun. From this basic hypothesis, he describes the true origins, as he sees them, and functions of the Adityas, who are her sons, in this context. As specifically relates to Lord Varuna, he tells us the seers of the Vedas in reality were teaching man that he was born from the heavy materials of the earth, ejected by the sun, or born, metaphorically, from goddess Aditya, which began to cool and started driving out different gases. He says, quote, "Science tells us that the combination of oxygen and hydrogen produces water. So water was formed below the earth and So water was formed below the earth and also not the earth in the form of the oceans. This is the scientific explanation of how Varuna Devata was born. His emphasis on the fact that this occurred both below the earth and on the earth is to conform with his definition of Lord Varuna as Lord of all waters in the sky, earth, and below the earth. Even artificially restricting himself to the Rig Veda alone and ignoring the three other Vedas, to support this conceptual structure requires that one ignore a vast amount of mantras within the 10 mandalas. For example, to go to the fundamental hypothesis, if Goddess Aditi is nothing more than the photosphere of the sun, why do the seers say of her, Aditi is the 5 classes of men? She is a universal phenomenon, not restricted to the sun. Regarding Lord Varuna himself, how can the sages tell us that Mitra and Varuna are vaster than heaven and earth if he is only the primeval waters? This is understood if it's referring to the terrestrial Varuna as outlined in the study. He himself notes under characteristics of Varuna that the Deva is kind-hearted and quotes the Rig Veda that he forgives men of their sins. If Varuna is merely the name for a chemical compound, how can it be said to have such human emotions as compassion, much less to forgive sin? If Varuna possesses such traits, he cannot be reducible to an object in that way. What would be the purpose of offering prayers and sacrifices to what is simply a chemical compound that can never respond to one's petitions? He further tells us that Varuna enforces natural law. Undoubtedly, this is to account for the verses where he's described as the guardian of the moral order. But, as we have seen, Lord Varuna is associated with just that, the moral and not the natural order, save for a specific element. Lord Vishnu is the preserver of the overarching cosmic order, not Lord Varuna. So this claim is not correct. Now, if we really want to play and go wild with this kind of speculation, we might guess or theorize that Lord Varuna is dark matter, and that the rays and streams of Varuna are dark photons. Varuna's judgment, then, would be the destruction these streams of dark photons might cause to other forms of matter. But I don't think so. The yogic Lord Varuna, the inner gate to transcendent ambrosia. The next subject to consider is the reflection of Varuna in the microcosm. I refer to this as the internal or yogic Varuna. To understand this, we will examine both the activities and forms of the Deva in the macrocosm, as well as verses which appear to have a more internal inflection. The teachings of the seers make clear that it is justified to view the Devas through such a lens. For example, the sages of the Atharva Vedas say, quote, "Therefore, whoever knows man regards him as Brahman's self, for all the Devas abide in him as cattle in their pens." Unquote. This is a clear statement that the Devas are not only in the macrocosm, but they exist within the microcosm of man as well. the starry sky within, the other side of the ego. The sages teach that the sky is the visible form of Indra. The other side of the daytime sky is the nighttime sky. It is there with the thousands eyes of the stars, the Milky Way pillar, and the visible path of the constellations, which the sun secretly follows in this daytime sky, that one encounters the terrestrial Varuna. It is in these depths that the celestial Lord Varuna symbolically dwells in the fathomless base of the firmament. The zone of the Yogic Varuna is thus concealed by the light of the Yogic Indra, which is the empirical ego, whose sun follows its path, although it cannot be directly seen. Without asserting that the Vedic seers conceptualized our modern psychiatric notion of the subconscious, it is certainly an appropriate metaphor here. The Yogic Varuna dwells within this hidden ocean, and it is there that he must be sought. There is some basis for this reading in the text of the Vedas. Quote, beholding with unclosing eyes, the cognizant of the things of heaven and earth, they conduct the ignorant man to duty. In the lowest depths of the ocean, through them, there is a bottom. May they lead us to the opposite shore of the vast expanse. The ignorant is thus led to the bottom of the river, Varuna's river, and from there to the opposite shore. The image is that one must descend to rise. Here it's a descent into the subconscious. This is similar to legends of the soul crossing the sky waters in northern European folklore, as one would find in Curiosities of Indo-European Folklore by Walter Kelly. And in the Mesoamerican cultural zone among the Maya Indians, one accesses the underworld of Xibalba, the night sky, through deep caverns and cenotes, which is why American tourists should not go swimming in them. This was how the warrior twins in the purple-hue accessed the underworld through a cave. A more modern example of this concept is found in Dr. Strassman's book, Inner Paths to Outer Space. Rays from the depths of the psyche. The royal Varuna, of pure vigor abiding in the baseless firmament, sustains on high a huge heap of light, the rays of which are pointed downward, while their base is above. May they become concentrated in us as the source of existence. Unquote. While within this depth shine the rays of the Yogic Varuna. Structurally, the 7 rivers which flow from Varuna and the rays are identical. In the terrestrial Varuna, these are the 7 visible planets in the macrocosm. In the microcosm, they are the influences of the planets within the individual. The planets are Devas, and they too are within us. The Western Renaissance occultist Cornelius Agrippa identified various body parts with the visible planets. This is probably too literal. They are not so directly perceived to the unconscious individual. The planets in the microcosm are psychic forces which move like underground rivers or tremors upon the tectonic plates of the ego. They glow within the ocean of the night sky, which is the flip side of the daytime sky of the empirical ego. There is an important additional point that must be made here. That which binds and that which liberates, and conversely, that which liberates and that which binds, are identical. The psychic factors within us, represented by our inner inner planets, can seize our minds and subconsciously animate us from the dark in ways which their influence cannot be perceived upon those who are unconscious in their lives. The sun follows the path of the constellations or nakshatras and is influenced by them, even though they are lost in the light of awareness, represented by the conscious daytime sky. These are the fetters of Varuna. We seek forgiveness from him, not so much for violation of some catalog of injunctions, but for living a life which is unconscious and ignorant. As we work with these forces within us to move beyond these states, their gravity ceases to pull us down and instead begins to draw us upwards. This is how they can liberate. The chakras. One interpretation that is sensible is that this set of 7 refers to the Laya Yoga chakra system within the etheric body. These also have planetary correspondences, so it fits nicely with this understanding of the rays of Varuna. One might argue in this conceptual framework that the pillar of Varuna is the spine or the etheric core upon which the chakras are arranged. I don't dismiss this, but I do have some reservations. Primarily, the majority of Westerners do not know that the chakras, as generally presented in Western language esoteric books, are only one of a number of different and conflicting systems. The chakra balancers at psychic fairs will tell you that this is basically a medical truth and that there is nothing else, but that's not correct, I'm sorry to say. Also, the planets don't align on the Milky Way, but I could just be being a bit pharisaical and picky here. More study is needed. Varuna's fetters as guardians of ambrosia. Since we are metaphorically connected to that heap of light in the depths through the rays it radiates to us, it would follow that the way back is to follow those very rivers. Pardon me. This is much like how the salmon, which is a symbol of wisdom in Celtic lore, must swim upstream to return to its source. Varuna is the lord and guardian of the ambrosia and the truth. These are two aspects here. There are two aspects here, in this function. He guards it with his power, which are his fetters as the manifestations of karma. He is the Lord in that he is the keeper and controls access. It is only by overcoming these fetters which bind the upper, lower, and the middle that one crosses the waters to that mysterious opposite shore of the truth, with all capitals. The ambrosia and the truth. Varuna is that gateway in the hidden ocean, the hidden side of the empirical ego, or the subconscious in modern terminology, where the macrocosm and the microcosm within man merge. It is the point where one experiences ambrosia and truth, again with the capital T. In reality, they are one. The ambrosia is the truth about ourselves. This great truth is not a secret. We all experience it continually, every moment of our lives. The vast majority of mankind are in ignorance of this truth, and that alone is our original sin that binds us. When we reach that other shore, we realize that we have always been there. As the seers of the Rig Veda tell us explicitly regarding this great truth and what it is in man, in one of my favorite passages of the Rig Veda, quote, "He is Hamsa, the sun dwelling in light, Vasu, the wind dwelling in the firmament, the invoker of Devas, Lord Agni, dwelling on the altar, the dweller among man as consciousness, the dweller in the most excellent orb, the sun, the dweller in truth, the dweller in the sky as air, born in the waters, in the rays of the light, in the variety of manifestations in the eastern mountains, the truth itself." Thank you very much for your time.